Yeah, I think it kind of sets the tone for the work, coming through like 3 different references. So one is this idea of the Anthropocene epoch, which is our current geological age. It's the age in which human influence on the whole world is the greatest influence. So geological age is usually, it's a span of time that kind of dwarfs like our human span of time. Just that thought that now we've, since about the 50s, come into an age where we are now the dominant influence. And then another reference is a comic strip that actually has the same name, Our New Age. Ran from, I think, the 50s through the 70s. And it was to educate people on science. So it kind of illustrated scientific topics with a really like a techno-utopian idealized view of science. It brought up a lot of issues that now we're like dealing with, like global warming and things. So it did it with a lot more of a hopeful lens in that, science not only is getting us into this, but will get us out of it. So that kind of idealized, progressive, or like modern progress view. So there's that aspect. And then the third reference, thinking about like coming of the age of Aquarius, referencing like New Age movement, kind of before that was such a thing, like just general hippie counterculture. So I reference a lot of that kind of imagery, and I think the overlap of those things, kind of this idealized view of the potential of science, this view of our world today and where we are from our influence, and then this kind of searching maybe outside of that science for alternative kind of like nature-based spirituality and things. So that kind of overlap of all those, I think, gets at the themes of this show. I think one theme of landscape for me is kind of an escape and a rejuvenation of getting out in the wild and what it can do for me mentally. I think kind of a part of it was a product of this past year and being really stuck in one's own head. It can't really serve as the escape in the same way when there's so much baggage associated kind of with like everything. So in thinking about like going to the National Monument for the fossil beds that a number of these paintings are, just considering like being in there, and they're all named after this guy John Day. There's 2 towns named after him, the river's named after him. And when we were there, I found a small plaque on the river that said the story of how it got the name John Day, and it was like he was a fur trapper that was robbed by Native Americans at the mouth of that river. It's kind of an unremarkable story, yet his name lives on. So I tried to kind of look into like what were some of the native names of that river, and it was really hard to find a lot of good information. That's just like one aspect where it kind of hints at where I can't just celebrate these spaces without this kind of sense of unease. When I was there, like at the fossil beds, one thing that I really enjoyed was the Paleontology Center, and there was a big mural for each period of time that was kind of, there's different fossils from different periods of time, and these murals were like, some of them were like tropical jungles with all sorts of animals which are all gone extinct. So between the murals and then seeing them relate to these different layers of like colorful rock, it really shows that these ecosystems don't have the permanence that you think of. I kind of wanted to compare that with the lushness of the forests in like Western Oregon that I've been painting. So in these forests, I have a lot of like decay, but going into renewal. So a lot of the nurse logs and the breaking down of wood, sprouting new growth. So you really kind of see the cycles of regeneration. And you think of it as like these are ancient forests. They're something that go on and on as kind of a closed cycle. But in considering when there's like increased fires every summer and a feeling of doom where it's like, well, these aren't gonna go on and on. I kind of like was looking back to these murals and these things that have come to pass. So really kind of, I don't know if it was so much like comfort and that maybe this isn't entirely new, but yeah, just like comparison and kind of grappling with just dramatic change. The still lifes were actually, there's something I started the show before this one, and it was, part of it was like giving another life to the landscape painting in that they directly correlate to the landscape. So each painting, the elements are all taken from one of the landscape paintings I've done. And when I started looking at more landscape, then I got into looking at a lot of the Dutch still lifes and the vanitas. And it was a good entry for a lot of these feelings, a lot of that unease. So like replacing the memento mori, which is usually done as like a human skull. It's some sort of reminder that you will die. Replacing that with like a fossilized skull, I feel like allowed me to, kind of address like ideas of extinction, how that idea of remember you must die like might actually apply to our landscape and our ecosystems as we know it. It gives me another opportunity to kind of bring in like a anthropological aspect to the work. You can bring in different furniture from different eras, different feelings to kind of deal with a lot more history. So there's a lot of symbolism, but also it's not direct symbolism, but like references to certain feelings of the work. So like everything's really thought out. And I think they kind of get at like my mental state of kind of being stuck in my own head and grappling with these different things. Like on the first one I did, which was actually the first painting I started for this show, is the still life on the tortoiseshell table. It's supposed to be like a resin kind of tortoiseshell plastic pattern, and to me it looks like very molten looking, and then that with the sage smoke really reminded me of the fires that were happening. And then the oddness of everything being named after John Day instead of like any of these native tribes of the area. Like I wanted to bring in that sage smudging because it's something I see as a problematic aspect of that New Age spirituality, is like there's not much regard for the real cultural significance of these ceremonies. In looking at the original like Dutch vanitas, as they're showing a lot of opulence in contrast with death, a lot of that opulence they're showing was really based on exotic objects, and they were all really objects of a really colonial society. Yeah, there's fruit brought in from warmer climates, porcelain from China, and it's really like displaying all this, and then there's a religious moral aspect to it, but it can be read pretty easily as like someone aware of this colonial dark side of all that. So I think it's kind of like an entry point for me to think of how in today's culture and in my own experience, how it is still present. The interiors give me a lot more vocabulary to kind of deal with these feelings I'm grappling with. I mean, for each painting, I probably have 30 or 40 photographs. Like it's a lot of details of different pieces. I take photos fairly indiscriminately, and then I am always sorting through. And then that allows me to kind of be inventive at the same time, but have all the references and details I want. The interesting thing with bringing in these interiors is it's actually allowing me to paint from life more in my studio, but in a similarly kind of like collaged manner, because they're partially made up, but a lot of the little artifacts I set up in light in my studio and just paint from life. Initially, I wanted to have a really large, or two paintings that really kind of blew up a smaller object. And I've painted different like gemstones or minerals in the past. So I wanted to paint one a lot larger than I have. And then I wanted also to have that painting of the mushroom. Because one, the contrast of like something that's, well, the titles of them, they're antonyms of each other. It's transient and enduring. You know, when you're looking at a stone wall and a mineral that was formed like a couple 100 million years ago, they're kind of these durable things. So I really wanted that in opposition to like a mushroom which pop up almost overnight and then within a few days they've kind of rotted out. But yeah, that piece, it's a large piece of fluorite, which I got from my grandparents. Originally, I just thought like I wanted an interesting background for a stone would be more stone, like a different stone wall. I saved pictures of different, you know, like a piece of furniture or different interiors. And one of them I'd saved just because I was like, well, this is like a really good stone wall. And it turned out to be an interior from Mies van der Rohe. It's like a really kind of epitomizes modern design. But then I wanted to bring in the connection of the atomic age to that like modernism that's in there. So the mobile is supposed to kind of be like almost like an atomic model, and it references like Calder, who in my view, like I love Calder's work, and he's kind of like really merging that modern creativity and making it physical, and there's still some like mysticism to his work. So the piece just has like all these connections. I think it just ties in with a lot of the show, but in a little more of a hopeful aspect, versus the mushroom, which is kind of supposed to counter it, is based off a specific Dutch floral painting that's a vanitas painting. The mushroom is like surrounded by more poisonous mushrooms and stinging nettles and things. So I don't know, it was like a really important painting for the show me to do, and it was really nice to paint. Like this, the stone is about this large, and I set it up and lit it and painted it all from life with no photos. And the mobile, it's actually like some of my dog's balls set up on like sticks to try to get the lighting right and all the shadows. Like, so that plus these photos of Mies van der Rohe's interior, and that's a table he designed too. A lot of it was just enjoyable challenge to kind of like make this work as a picture. I don't know.